Welcome to yet another edition of Future Forward, and this week we are going to deconstruct bit by bit, piece by piece, South by Southwest Interactive. I'm Steve Rosenbaum.
I'm Gene DeRose.
And we've got 4 chapters in today's show, a lot to cover. It was a pretty amazing week in Austin, I've got to say. And,
yeah, but get it like the meat of the categories. Give me a sense of the vibe there, and you know, you and I were talking offline. The evolution of South by.
So, it's this is my 10th year, and every year is different. Every year, some years. I mean, I've been there going long enough that I remember when it was home to every app imaginable launching. Every street corner was full of people. Download this app, try my app. It was where Twitter launched. It was where Foursquare launched. It was where GroupMe launched. And so just, in the time is passing category, no apps this year. No,
really? That's interesting. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure they were there. Don't get me wrong. It's such a big event that someone's going to, tweet it back at me after saying that. Oh, you missed, there was a whole room full of apps. But in terms
but
of
if it's not a major launch that you feel you remember it by, you're right.
Yeah, well, and again, keep in mind, it's such a big event that 4 people will go and have 4 different experiences.
Of course.
But for me, not an app show.
Yeah.
On the fabulous front, everything's moved downtown. There's no more Sheraton Hotel. There's no more out of town. So it all was walking. There was no buses, no trying to get a car. It became a little more intimate because a number of big hotels opened up downtown.
Really?
So that was great.
That's smart too.
Yeah. But there were a couple of things we're going to talk about that were like big events, big, tentpole events, and I thought we'd just start with Apple.
Yeah, for sure.
So, Apple is a pretty insular company. You don't see them, they don't go to CES. Their executives don't do a lot of, the circuit. And when I found myself sitting in the front row for Eddy Q, I kind of pinched myself a little bit. I'm like, wow, I have no idea what he sounds like. Like I had no snapshot in my head of kind of who he was or what his demeanor was. And a lot of what you learn at these events is not what's going to be the headline that makes the trades, but the body language of these people. And he was fascinating, I have to say. Yeah.
Yeah, and in a good way, unexpected. I guess you didn't have expectations.
Very confident, very low key, very clear about what they're doing. They're in no, at least, and it didn't feel like, sometimes you see executives and it feels like the PR team has prepped them and they've got keywords they're trying to hit, and there was none of that. I mean,
right.
2 big headlines for the purposes of our focus.
Right.
One, talked a lot about curation.
Yeah.
Curated news. With, and obviously that's a word that's near and dear to my heart.
Of course, yeah.
But
just so everyone knows, you're the author of Curation Nation.
Yeah. And so, I appreciated that he used my book title. But his point, and he was very careful not to badmouth anyone, but he was clearly making it importantly evident that he was not Facebook and he was not Twitter and he was not Google. Really clear about the fact that Apple takes filtering and organizing and quality really seriously.
Yeah, but tell me, because I feel like Apple has unwittingly enabled the age of social as well as curation while having no particular skills or necessarily until recently intent in that direction. They're just, it's a closed system. They don't, they're into big media, but what does he mean by curation, right? The apps that the iPhone enables are all great at curation, and being able to, do all this stuff makes things curatable. But does he mean playlist? Does he mean
So two things. One is
Pinterest?
Apple News,
Yeah, well, let's talk about that. Yeah,
which I've never heard Apple talk about publicly before. But,
right.
It is the easy go-to curated news app on your phone. And for the first time, he talked about the growth in volume around curated news. And that,
Right.
I think, was really important.
Does he distinguish? So I've used the Apple, the iPhone News app, which is not necessarily the same thing, but that has emerged in the last year. But does he truly mean curated, or does he mean personalized, customized?
No, he means curated.
He really does. Okay.
Yeah. You can choose. So if you look at Apple News, it has two layers to it. There's the layer that comes without, but automatically if you right swipe your phone, and that is their choices about the news that's relevant that they feature at the top. And he was very careful about the fact that we choose the publishers, we choose quality, and then there is personalization, which is you can go in and click and check and say, I want this, I don't want this, and you can filter it. But I mean, he talked about curated news and quality as a drumbeat in this entire hour. And then he talked about video and film. And that was interesting for two reasons. One, because, he was really kind of very honest about the fact, he's like, in terms of what we bring to that party, he's like, we don't have that skill set. We're not filmmakers. Now, he said, I spent 2 years looking to hire an executive to run that area for me. And then he said, and we've hired two great executives. And he paused, and this is maybe just my judgment, but it felt to me as an audience member like he couldn't quite remember their names.
That doesn't surprise me.
Well,
I think his thing is being above the fray of all this stuff too, which is why he's so clean and how he talks.
I guess, but if these are literally his, hand-picked compadres that are going to lead that company into the already frothy waters of Netflix and Amazon and Hulu, you'd think he'd be able to say, they both came from Sony, we know that, but they're not name brand visibility people. So,
and they're not digital per se. I tend to think, again, I think Apple has had a little bit of a old worldish kind of view of media. They want to let you see movies. They want to, they're scratching their heads hard about Netflix and everything. But, all right, we could come back to, but I still practically, rubber meets the road, would love to know what his really great examples are of curation, because the one I forgot to mention is the native ability to share on the iPhone is almost miraculous. You don't have to, within your app, build in a lot of sharing capabilities, because when that little thing pops up off of the square with the arrow, you can decide whether to forward it to any of your social networks or add a little thing and make it a Twitter or send it to your, messaging. But my page of the news with my spin on it and, my package is curation. You know this stuff inside out.
But here's the other thing. And clearly, Apple made a decision to have him, or he made a decision to be on stage.
Yeah.
Literally at the moment that they began the conversation with Dylan Byers from CNN, they sent out a release announcing an acquisition that they made that morning. Well, it had been obviously made weeks in advance, and they held the announcement. And they bought a magazine platform called Texture.
Oh, I didn't even know that. Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And that was, again, why so again, very sophisticated. That was why the word curation kept coming up, because Texture is a curated magazine app of high quality, and I know it only as a bystander. I'm not a subscriber to Texture,
Right.
But
Right.
Texture was in some ways the magazine industry's attempt to beat the platform wars by owning their own platform, and
Right. Yeah.
so the fact that they sold it to Apple, starts to look like and this is a clue, right? I mean, if you think about the early days of the iPod, Apple was not the first developer of digital music device. It came at the right moment with the right high quality offering and won that battle. And it felt a little bit like that was what he was saying, which is, Facebook and YouTube and Twitter have so muddied the waters that we can just wade in late and thoughtfully and win. That was that was the body language.
And you mean in curation broadly and news and media as well as magazines in particular, or that's a vehicle through which to do this?
New content, relevant news content.
Right.
Didn't seem like they had any plans to be in the content production business.
Right. So do you feel like, where does that stand in the context of, so if you take an example of, Time magazine, probably a highly charged example, but, the website, these guys have got to decide what kind of apps to have. Apple can make money off of that. It means things are being seen there. And then there's this emerging presence within YouTube, on Twitter, and mostly, I think, for when Time Magazine thinks about it, within the Facebook feed. Do we have a presence? Do we have a Facebook page? That's all sort of floating around there. This is something that comes at us from a new direction where a consolidated news or magazine app that has curation in it will be a place where they want to be. Too many details.
No,
really.
I think the answer is yes. I think,
yes.
The body language again was, that old kind of bad, slightly off color story about the old bull and the young bull standing on, they both see looking at the top of the mountain. They say, let's run down there. He had this very, we know what we want to deliver. He had great confidence in how we're going to deliver it. And it was him entering the content space between texture and Apple News and video. They are in it, is essentially what he was saying.
So I've had a theory for a long time that I actually haven't talked about much here, which is that in the 21st century or in the digital age, news is not something we go after. It's something that happens along the way, which is to say, people pick up their news from, Jon Stewart and now John Oliver or the late night talk shows. They find it in their Facebook feed. They find it on Twitter. They find it when they want to know more broadly what's going on. But, most of us have to go scratch our head to remember if we, still have our Facebook, our Google News search feed stuff is still there, or, do we even go, grab it? Do we think of the Times as news? We certainly don't watch the nightly news anymore. So do they think somebody's going to go spend time on a news app or is it embedded in the overall experience?
I think they think that you're going to pick up your phone and go, what's going on, and swipe right, and it's there. And I think that, being the most, as opposed to having to, again, maybe it's as simple as knowing that the science says the person who gets you to what you want with the fewest clicks wins.
Yeah, I think it's true. And I also think with big events, we're not talking about this per se, and I know we got to move on, but video, I think, is a big deal. And increasingly, when crazy shit happens, you want to go in real time. And a lot of us still have to go turn on CNN in order to get a real-time live news feed of things and really, really be on the cutting edge. I think that's one of the opportunities that we're going to start to see with, live streams and things like that. But that's not this either.
So my take on Apple, I wrote for Video Inc. It's up as of 2 days ago. My take about the 5 things that happened at South by that are memorable is going to be on Media Village. And there are 2 things that we haven't talked about yet that I want to get to.
Yeah.
There's this phrase that brand marketers use that some of our listeners will say, of course, and others will never. This phrase is activations.
Yeah.
And brand activations. And there were 2 activations at South by this year that were both just mind-blowing in their scope and complexity and beauty as marketing. One was Westworld, which literally built a Westworld destination that you could sign up and go to and be inside Westworld as either a black hat or a white hat. It was a 4-hour commitment.
Wow.
Yeah. Half-hour bus ride to Westworld, 3-hour experience, half-hour back to the conference. I did not do it.
Interesting.
But I had
feedback from others.
What?
Feedback from others that did do it. Any idea how
Fabulous.
it was? Yeah.
Incredibly immersive. Fabulous.
And
Everyone
does
said
this
it was
feel
amazing.
go to an amusement park in perpetuity, or is it a kind of a pop-up store
Pop-up.
thing? Yeah.
Gone.
Yeah. So activation in that sense is because they're not movies, they don't get the benefits of trailers and things. This is about something that's going to launch in the summer or next fall, but they want to keep the home fires burning.
Yeah, and they want people talking about Westworld.
Right. So activations is kind of it's marketing related as much as anything.
But the one that made the most impact, and that I think was the bravest, was Ready Player One.
Really?
So they had a huge downtown experience with trailer homes stacked just like from the book, and it was, and everyone who went through it said it was incredibly immersive and fabulous. They announced with about 12 hours notice that they would be premiering the movie at South by Southwest. No one knew this.
Wow.
And I busted my ass to get tickets and did not succeed. And the film was introduced by Steven Spielberg.
Wow.
And South by is such a geeky, complicated group of people that it was really brave because it could have gone sideways.
Well, I think, you're pointing up something that connects to what you said at the outset, which is, apps have gone away a little bit. Because I do think 3 or 5 years ago, apps, and I actually benefited from this when I tried to launch my Want app, this community was a very powerful influencer group through which to launch a major consumer effort within the relatively smaller world of digital. But I think in the last few years, bigger media has woken up to that opportunity. That's why Bruce Springsteen will go and speak there. That's why
right.
Slightly overlaps in from the edges of the movie and music side of this. And I think they're realizing, and maybe that's stolen thunder, that apps would love to still do this, but they have to buy too much to get that much attention, whereas a movie is going to blow them out of the water.
So, two things about Ready Player One. I'm sure we're going to be talking a lot about it in the next couple of shows.
Yeah.
One, the reviews that came out of that screening were over the moon fabulous.
Really?
Yeah, and from digital people, from film people across the board, because South by also has a big film festival.
Of course, yes.
So the reviews were, people literally said Spielberg's best movie in 15 years.
Wow, that's amazing.
And he said afterwards that he was backstage before the screening that he was absolutely terrified.
Wow.
So he's got
terrified because this is a big deal.
Well, because it could. Now I'm overselling a little bit, but it could be the first moment that mass audiences begin to understand what VR could be
in a real way, rather than in a Tron or kind of futuristic way.
Yeah, it could really be the starting gun of VR being like, whoa, now I see it and I felt it and it was a great story. And it's also, if you know the book at all, there's also a whole thread of 80s music and 80s references that are fun. So it is, I haven't seen it yet. I've got my tickets. I'm excited. I'm going opening night.
Yeah. All right. Well, we are going to have to talk about this a lot more. And I know, is this the block for today on this, or are we coming back to this later? Because there's definitely a lot to talk about. I like the way you set up in our questions about this in advance about what it means for VR. But I know
that's about as much as I have to say about it. I didn't see the movie. I did read the book. The book, the history of books to movies is fraught with disaster, and so
it's had a long run.
So two other quick things, and then we can move on a little bit. But much bigger international presence this year than ever before, which was great and felt very global and so I did a panel, which we'll talk about in a minute, But
Yeah.
all the questions at the end of the panel were from people from international. And then last but not least, and maybe this is true every year and I just didn't sense it as much, but for me it was a year of bold-faced names. I mean, Bernie Sanders, Sadiq Khan from London, Joe Biden, Elon Musk's, Mark Hamill, Arnold Schwarzenegger. I mean, it was just, it seemed like every day there were 3 or 4 like people that could have been the headliner.
Yeah. I mean, for our cultural universe, digital intelligentsia and everything, South by Southwest is, a lot of people have said, it's had its day or whatever, but there's a lag in these things, and broad general cultural figures are finding this a very powerful place. The numbers must just not lie with this. It's just feels right at that stage where they figured out a way to make this as big as something, and I think their attachment to Austin itself is a big deal. I was asking you about Ready Player One because I wanted to add a little parallel flavor, because I happened to see a few movies and watch TV this weekend, and my son and I we saw Wrinkle in Time, which is another story, but Ready Player One is now dominating the TV commercials and the trailers. And, he's a very sophisticated Minecraft playing 10-year-old, and it's a little too crazy and scary and beyond his realm, I think. He probably may or may not see it. But I was struck by the question we both thought was like, wow, maybe this might be the first movie, you might want to see with a VR helmet on, which is real funny because of what you said, because I actually thought the previews were very loud and cacophonous and so chaotic. I was thinking, I wonder if this is going to be able to translate sufficiently.
That's really interesting.
On the big screen.
I don't know the answer to that, but that's a great question.
But he's a great storyteller,
based on the reviews, I would say it did, but
say yes. And sometimes the trailer doesn't represent what the movie is, and then the trailer reminded me of like a Marvel kind of thing, which is all about noise and guns. So
the other, there were a couple of the things. One of the things that for me was pretty powerful was a couple different conversations that I had and experiences that I had relative to the New York Times.
Yeah.
So the first thing I did was went to a panel that Sam Dolnick moderated with 2 terrific writers, Nellie Bowles and Mike Isaac, and really, came away thinking new, young voices, self-referential, a little bit self-effacing, honest, funny, smart. There was no voice of God New York Times presence. It was much more, we're working on, for me it was a new kind of introspective New York Times. And then I went and saw Michael Barbaro.
That's what I was going to ask. Okay, Barbaro, yeah.
Who was fantastic. He interviewed a woman named, I always mispronounce her name, Rukmini Calamachi, who's their ISIS terrorism reporter. And it was, the way she told about the beat she covers and how she's worked her way into the story was literally terrifying. Like, I just sat there in the audience thinking, this woman has risked her life to do her job. In a way that I've reporters risk their life all the time, but she's been on this beat for 2 years. And it was just, the stories she told were unbelievably riveting. And I came away and I wrote a piece for Media Insider about this. I came away thinking it really was a new kind of voice at the New York Times. And
you just so people know that are just listening to this raw, subject is podcasting, the subtext at the very least. And, Michael Barbaro is the host of a runaway hit, The Daily, which is the New York Times Daily Summary. And I believe I've talked about this in an earlier episode, which is to say this is literally displaced I Must Turn on NPR as the first thing I do in the morning, including opening up the paper Times. And part of the reason, which we didn't discuss last time, is how remarkable Michael Barbaro is as the host and moderator of these 20-minute top of the news, occasionally a little bit of a featurey magazine piece that frequently uses their key journalists. And I think that it's a possible breakthrough moment for major high-quality news organizations like the Times that haven't been places other than print, because these people are so good and so sophisticated that you can put a microphone in front of them and they're great. And with a little production value, it's pretty remarkable.
And here's the thing about it that I came away from after watching him, and why I think it is in some ways immediately at the top of the stack. The conversations he has with the reporters are not interviews. They are discussions among colleagues.
Yeah.
And so he's asking sophisticated reporter questions with respect and with understanding, and as someone who's built real relationships with these are friends of his.
Yeah, and ironically, relative to our opening topic, it feels if you're going to try to pin down what this new model is, it's a little bit curative. It feels like curation in a way. It's a sort of a handcrafted way of delivering the news story, which you're getting a little, how did it happen? When you interviewed this, you're not giving them the story. He's interviewing them about what it was like to interview the people he had to talk to for the story. You know, the way he leads through it, it feels like a doc on the subject of the journalism issue at hand. It's really, but to say that is not to say that it's so wonky and inside baseball that it is not entertaining and compelling at a broad level. This is like they've struck something that is recognizable in the new way that we receive and process news. Eddy Q should be into that stuff as much as he is into how to, cut and paste HTML links into multimedia formats.
Now, having said that, the Times has also announced that they're going to do a weekly half-hour television show.
Yeah, doesn't surprise me because it's a logical extension.
Well, but I think that the challenges for them are that the podcasting canvas that they came to was literally a white canvas. And their audience didn't have any preconceived notions about what they were expecting, and and podcasting has riveted to the top of our consciousness because you can do it while you're on the subway or in your car or walking down the street. Television requires you to get someone to pay attention. There's a generation that's grown up on YouTube, and I think that there's going to be a challenge there for the Times to take its credibility and its journalism and its storytelling and get a young audience to engage without it looking too much like old-fashioned TV.
I think that's dead on, and I think that makes a lot of sense to me. And it raises the question of why are they bothering with a video format on television? Because
that's interesting.
In some ways, first of all, their presence on television is. It reminds me of like something like BuzzFeed. They're everywhere, but it's this person on this show, this person talking heads there. Whereas to have a show itself, you just talk me out of why they should be doing it versus, everything about television, including the face made for television, cliche, and the fact that it just isn't necessarily as visually compelling.
Well, to be clear, when they say television, they may mean Netflix, Amazon, Hulu. I don't think they mean Discovery. I think they mean SVOD television, but no one has yet gotten SVOD news right. I mean, that David Letterman Obama moment kind of landed with a bit of a thud, didn't make a lot of noise.
I almost think of John Oliver as an example versus other things, but for sure.
So Netflix, by the way, is also talking about the fact that they're going to create their own 24-hour news. So before we run out of time, just the one other thing that I think came out last week and that I think is complicated and is important is that YouTube made this announcement that they were going to start linking to Wikipedia whenever there was a controversial video, and the first kind of echo of it was, oh, that's great. That's that's their version of kind of truth telling around potentially, inaccurate videos. That went great for about, 3 hours.
Yeah.
And then Wikipedia came out and said, well, it would have been nice if you talked to us about that. And that created, in some ways, a more complicated, like the fact that YouTube announced what seemed like a relationship with Wikipedia without mentioning to Wikipedia that they were doing it, I think rubbed a lot of people the wrong way.
Yeah, I think that, and it's, to me, it's indicative of a few things. One is a lot of the modern digital companies that have a lot of audience are, everything isn't deals and payments. It's get on my system or I'm going to connect to you, but I'm not necessarily going to have a relationship with you that's a direct or a hands-on or a money related. And so I think that that's something that was radioactive and even exciting enough that why weren't they talking about it, right? That was what you said to me offline.
Yeah.
Maybe deal, maybe there's some money that should exchange. But the second thing I really want to, make clear is, I don't know if you've noticed, but in the last 2 years, increasingly, when you do Google searches on major topics, Wikipedia is like almost lodged in there at the top as the first entry.
Yep.
I often am looking for a website and I accidentally land on the Wikipedia page for whatever that happens to be. And so I think maybe that's something that has benefited Wikipedia a lot. And from Google's point of view, this was just another version of that. We're just going to send them over that way. But there's a lot.
Have you ever tried to edit a Wikipedia entry?
I've worked with some people to have them do it.
It's really hard.
It's really hard, and it's a noble and excruciating, but still Wild West process. Just so people know, it's a little bit like the old sysop world. Certain people, it has to pass a certain muster. It has to have verifiability, and it has to have citations. So you're submitting a link. If you want to put a line in there that says Donald Trump is an orange-haired goon, you're not going to be able to just do that. You have to make sure that there's a quote, or you have to put it in quotes, or you have to do whatever, and then it has to go through a process and get approved. So it's a big deal, and how they do news is a really bigger deal. I think Wikipedia and Reddit are the two sneakiest big players in news that exist that people don't realize.
Yeah, well, I mean, we don't have the time to start down the path of Reddit because I have a lot to say about that. We'll save that for another.
Well, that's an interesting thing. Maybe we should do a future thing about the sort of between the lines, side of news, because there's a lot to cover there.
So just because we're going to run out of time, we wanted to just talk for a minute about the Wired article about Ready Player One.
Yes.
Just to come back to that, because I thought the fact that they said, is just beyond our grasp. I wasn't sure whether or not they meant like people won't understand it, or we're going to take people to a new place. Like, I mean, did you have a take on kind of what they were trying to get at?
I think it's a little bit of the second part of well, it's a combination. I think that there is a risk that from a technology point of view, this is the equivalent of an artsy film in the sense that it may not register for those that are not a little bit seeped in just what VR is and what should be going on, and for people that have spent any amount of time in these virtual worlds or with a headset on. And so I don't have a feel for what that answer is going to be. And it feels like, especially based on what you said, it looks like it's already going to be a critical success and it's destined to become a critically acclaimed classic. But is it going to be, the Titanic, or is it going to be, the Post?
No, it's going to be, no. I mean, so
somewhere in between, maybe.
No, I think it's going to be Titanic. I think it's.
You really do. So you would reject whatever it is Wired is trying to say.
Well, I mean, so
it's about whether it's good for VR, that side of it.
So the movie's set in 2045, which is not that far in the future. I mean, we're talking about 25 years. So it suggests that the physical world is going in such a sideways direction that people are going to use VR as the only kind of escape from what becomes a fairly bleak, you know, I believe that the writer calls it meat space.
Right,
right.
Right.
That's probably a gamer phrase, but I'll.
Yeah.
So we're going to watch the movie. We're going to talk about the movie for sure. Maybe we'll show a little bit of a trailer. We are out of time for this show, and I now need to catch up on a week's worth of sleep after South by. But you know, that's pretty much all I got.
I think what we didn't spend time on, and we're going to have to do a little bit next week, is more your panel and how that went. I really want to hear a little more about what the substance of that is. We don't have to do it now if we're out of time, but it merits some discussion, and maybe it fits into a discussion that's more zeroed in on news anyway, where we can hear a little bit.
You know, I'll give you the 30 seconds now, and then we'll do it deeper. The panel was called Facebook and the Evolution of News. We had 3 terrific panelists. We had Brian Stelter from the New York Times, from CNN, formerly of the New York Times.
Yes.
We had Sarah Fisher from Axios, and we had Alex Hardiman from Facebook. The room was packed with people that I think wanted to see Facebook held responsible for the coming downfall of publishing.
Yeah.
And it didn't go that way, which I'm happy about. I was the moderator, so my job was to have it. And in the end, I thought Facebook was very forthright about what it was working on and what the challenges were. And I thought Alex was very smart and very impressive. And by the way, the thing we found out in the green room before we all walked on stage was all 3 of them had history at the New York Times.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to ask you whether, because I would have thought if it wasn't you, that at least having Brian there, Brian Stelter would be a little bit of a foil for, if not attacking, then insisting on Facebook being held accountable.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
But those thrusts were parried.
Yeah, and Alex had been at the Times for 10 years.
Right.
As you know, running product. So she has real, you know, she's not one of these, you know, algorithm people who just wandered into news. She's a news person that understands product. Does
that disarm the world because she can be a few feet ahead of any incoming missiles and just, you know, or is she having an impact? And maybe that's
no. You know, we won't have time to do the whole panel today, but the long and short of it is, no, she was. I think a lot of people in the room came away feeling like the fact that she was at Facebook was a really good thing.
Well, exactly. And maybe that's a good way to end it, because what I do think is important that I've griped about a lot, we both griped about, is that Facebook, like a lot of tech executives, don't even necessarily seem conversant in a dialogue around news. They make ham-handed mistakes. They don't even understand what's happening before their eyes for being so sophisticated in so many areas. So whether that's what they know what they're doing or they even know how to talk to the world without stepping in it, that's a good first step.
And with that, we are out of time. Gene, see you next week. Have a good week.
Steve,
Future Forward.
Yep. Bye-bye.